Yeah, liminal spaces basically are like thresholds, right? They're the in-between stage. And our brains really don't love them. We like certainty, we like patterns, we're always looking for predictability. And so that in between, that kind of soupy, messy middle is a really hard place for most of us.
Hello, you are listening to the Late Bloomer Living podcast. I'm Yvonne Marchese, your host, and I'm so happy you're here. I created this podcast to give you inspiration and let you know you're not alone in feeling stuck in midlife. I also invite you to join the Age Agitators Club for women, where we come together monthly to hatch our plans for making waves as we age. Being part of this community for women will remind you on a regular basis that you're not too old, and it's never too late to do that thing you've been thinking about. You can find more information at latebloomerliving.com/community, and I hope to see you there. Hello, my friend. Oh, I'm so excited to share today's conversation with you because we are talking about something so many of us are facing: midlife transitions. My guest today is Rebecca Sutherns. She's an author and midlife transition coach who's on a mission to help midlife women navigate life's toughest transitions, whether it's career shifts, empty nests, or redefining your sense of purpose. And here's the thing, Rebecca doesn't just talk about change. She helps you understand why it feels so uncomfortable, and more importantly, how to make it feel a little less daunting. Now, if you're a mom with older kids or someone facing an empty nest, this conversation is really going to hit home. Rebecca talks about the messy in-between stage when you're letting go of one role but haven't quite stepped into a new one. But here's the thing. Rebecca's insights go way beyond parenting. If you're going through a career change, heading into retirement, or just feeling stuck, there are so many golden nuggets here for you. If there's one thing you can count on in life, it's that change is coming, my friend. So in this conversation, we talk about what it's like to be in that in-between space where you've left one chapter, but you haven't quite figured out the next one. Rebecca calls that a liminal space. And she explains why it's not only okay to feel lost there, it's completely normal. If you've ever felt stuck or untethered as you navigate a major life change, this episode is for you. It will help you see why feeling lost in a transition is totally normal, and more importantly, how you can use that discomfort as a launching pad for something new and exciting. And make sure you listen all the way to the end, because Rebecca shares some super helpful resources you can start using right away to find clarity and embrace your own transition. Okie dokie, without further ado, here's Rebecca Sutherns. Let's go. Hey, Rebecca, thank you so much for being with me today.
My pleasure.
Oh my gosh. So, transitioning in midlife. You know, we spoke once before we got on the phone today, and if I remember right, we're talking about liminal spaces.
Yeah.
And that in-between thing, which
Yeah.
I just have to tell you, and as we were chatting before I hit the record button this morning, I am in the middle of a full-on liminal space right now. My youngest kid just turned 18. We're waiting to hear from colleges. You know, I am thinking about my what's next in the midst of that. And something that you said, I really want to dive into this for anybody who's listening today. You've got older kids, but you were talking about how it was that transition time that was the hardest for you, when it was like it's neither here nor there. They're not quite out of the nest, but they kind of are. And where do you fit into that scenario? And that is a liminal space, right?
Yeah, liminal spaces basically are like thresholds, right? They're the in-between stage. And our brains really don't love them. We like certainty, we like patterns, we're always looking for predictability. And so that in between, that kind of soupy, messy middle is a really hard place for most of us. Some of us like it, most people don't. And sometimes when we're in it, we just want to rush through it because we're so uncomfortable and we feel kind of untethered that at times we either want to go back to identities or roles that are no longer suiting us or no longer available to us, or we want to rush into the next stage when we really don't maybe even know what that is, or it's the timing of that might not be quite right. But it's because that in between doesn't feel good. And I was like that during, I feel like there should be more written on emptying nest rather than just empty, because I've been actually doing better with this since my kids have been gone. And I was fine when they were all here, but that in between of some of them here and some of them gone, and they might need me. So therefore, I'm not sure I want to embark on a whole new big exciting project for me in case I'm not available to them. But most of the time, they don't need me at all. They're big and fine. And I think also the surprisingly difficult feelings that come alongside transitions that we actually want. Like this is like often for a lot of families, the empty nest phase is good news, right? It's our kids are
It's
launching, it's
fantastic.
exactly what we raised them for. It's better than them, you know, endlessly playing video games in our basement or something. So it's a good news story. And I think some of us get surprised, I certainly did, by how hard it was when it was something that we wanted. So I think we expect transitions that are tragic or sad or involuntary, those ones we kind of expect to be hard. But I think we get blindsided almost doubly by the ones that are hard and we thought they'd be okay.
Exactly. Oh my gosh. You are in my brain. And it's hard because then you can make yourself wrong. You can make yourself feel like why am I feeling bad when my life is good, when things are good on, on paper and and from everything I say I want, my kids are doing well. They're pretty much thriving. My husband was like, "Okay, we got two of them to 18 and beyond." Accomplishment, right? And yet there is I especially was blindsided with our first one at the age of 18. That shift from, oh, okay, I can't go to doctor's appointments anymore with them. I can't, I need permission from them to even know what's happening in their doctor's appointments, right? And it's such a shift. It is such a shift. And I
Yeah,
have
it
been
really is.
holding back in my own life for the past year because I do want to be available for my kiddo who is in his last year of high school. And there's things I want to do professionally that I'm just like, it's not the time. It's not the time. And it could be, but it's me personally saying, no, I want to be here when he needs me, even though that's not that often. You nailed it. You nailed it.
No, that's exactly right. And I think I do find that it tends to fall into one of two patterns. One is that some of us do know what we want, but we're holding back doing it because the timing isn't quite right.
Mhm.
And others of us are struggling to know what we do want to do. But in either case, I think it's an example of an identity shift for us when a primary identity for some people, our main identity is shifting into something else. And I think I naively thought, I do remember when I was the one leaving home, watching my mom, watching some of my other friends' parents, we kind of had this very naive story that, the moms at that time, a generation ago, some of them, more of them were home full time. And it was kind of this story that we were telling ourselves as 18-year-olds that, well, they just don't have enough other stuff going on in their life. And if they had been working for pay or doing more in their life, they would be finding this transition easier, or they would be clinging less tightly to their daughters who were leaving or whatever it would be. And that is so not true in my experience, where, it just feels pretty naive now to look back and say, no, I've had lots of other things going on, lots of other identities, lots of other sources of meaning in my life. And yet, because our children are so important to us, this is a primary identity that is hard to let go of. And I think part of what we need to remember two things that can help. One is knowing that not everything is changing. So I think I've been able over the last number of years, I mean, my emptying nest stage took pretty close to a decade. And, realizing now that the kids are gone, I'm still parenting them in a really different way. And I think there was a sense of loss and grief and readjustment of a role that I was really enjoying that I wasn't quite ready to give up. And remembering that I'm not giving it up. It is changing, but in lots of ways I can now look back and say it's changing for the better. There's a whole lot of stress and demands and uncertainty that I don't live with now, that you don't really even notice because you're right in it. And so I think that idea of reminding our nervous system and our hearts that there is continuity in this, but also giving ourselves time to grieve it. And to say there are, like, even though this is a desired happy news kind of change, there is loss in it, and there is adjustment, and allowing ourselves to sit in that long enough to work that through, I think is okay, because the toxically positive spin on it doesn't help us all that much to move through it either. So I don't want to see people wallowing, but I also don't want to see them moving ahead too quickly and kind of pretending that it all feels good because we think on paper it's supposed to, when actually it just really doesn't. And it can be a voluntary, chosen good news story that is still hard for us.
Yeah. So much is going through my mind right now. I started this podcast when I was 50. So I'm coming up on a 5-year anniversary in June for the podcast. And I was thinking, oh, I'm all set because I have this new passion, this new th and I'm a photographer and I love doing that too. And I thought, oh, I have plenty to fill my plate when they're gone. And still it is hitting. So I guess where I'm going with this is, what did you do? I don't know if you had something that filled your plate. I mean, I know you've been working with corporations in your past, and so you had a career, right?
Yep.
Um, and I'm wondering, like, did you also find that you were a little surprised, even though you had a full life, that this was happening? And what did you do to not try to step into that toxic positivity or let yourself wallow? What did you do?
Yeah, I mean it's a long journey, right? And so there's a lot of days in that.
Yeah.
Um, right? And so there's all different things. And I think part of what I hear inside both my story and yours and others is, you know, we're busy people. It's not like our kids, for example, are the only thing on our calendar. But the difference, I think, has to do with meaning, not just with busy. And so the idea of, I have things to do, but is that volunteer thing or that paid job or that caregiving role that I now have for my aging parents or whatever it is, does that give me the same sense of contribution and meaning that raising my kids did? And I remember going through a phase where I went, nothing's going to measure up to that. That was such an important and fulfilling, not every day, but often a very fulfilling role, one where I know that I can't be replaced in the same way that I could be in any, corporate job or with any client I'm working with. And so I think that the deep sense of meaning and purpose is what people are often craving. And the way that that tends to morph both in my own life and with other people is, it gets dispersed across other endeavors that maybe cumulatively work together to give us that sense of meaning and purpose that we need, that maybe was really concentrated in the humans that we were raising before. So I don't think that our desire for meaning and contribution and purpose changes. I think that we need to find other ways to have that satisfied, including with our kids. And so remembering that in most cases, they're not gone completely. There is still an element of contributing to their adult lives. And certainly for many of us, grandparenting comes into the picture. And for some people, they're navigating job changes, maybe into retirement, maybe not. And so I think one of the things that can really help is actually experimentation, is not feeling like you need to know what your next chapter is going to be like right away and getting it right. But it really helped my husband and I to have a sense of holding that loosely and trying some stuff and saying, what works for us now, and even what might work for us now might not work for us 2 years from now. So we weren't making and aren't making any huge decisions. We're not yet selling the house. We're not yet, renting a place in a sunnier location, as much as I would love to get out of today's snow. We're doing things that we're lowering the stakes a little bit so that we can try some things and get to know who we are now. Because I find sometimes my own self-concept and my identities that I hold are slower to change than my kids are. And so this was true when they were babies too, right? You finally find they're finally good in the exerciser or something, and then they outgrow it and you're like, shoot, what am I going to do to keep you busy now
Dang
while I
it. Dang it, that was working
it was
yesterday.
working and now you're mobile and I don't know what to do, right? And it's kind of like that, where it's like, I need a sec to catch up
Yeah.
with who you're becoming, and I can figure out who I am in relation to that. And also figuring out, the actual, I feel like in our family, the literal center of gravity is changing. It was very much around the kids and around them as a unit. And you know what? I'm noticing we've got 4 kids in their 20s now, and I'm noticing that they are having to adjust to this too. This isn't only my story. It's, they miss each other. They miss those years of all being together as much as they were probably on each other's nerves at that time. They are craving that now, and it's so gratifying to watch them creating opportunities to be together because they miss one another. We happen to have 2 kids living across the country and 2 kids living where we are. So we have this kind of intense, like 2 of the kids we see almost every day and 2 of them we see very rarely. And I noticed that it's the whole family misses those previous days, but at the same time, we're creating new patterns, new rituals, new things to look forward to. So that would be another encouragement. One is experimentation, and one is having things to look forward to on your calendar. I think there's something really motivating about having things to look forward to. And sometimes for me, that is looking forward to the kids visiting, but sometimes it's looking forward to, a trip I'm going to take or a conference I'm going to attend, or time with some girlfriends or whatever. And I have a level of freedom now over my calendar that I didn't have before. And I remember when things were really painful early days of this, I'm like, I don't want an empty calendar. I'm fine for the kids' stuff to, fill it in. That's the grieving piece I'm referring to, is that I think we need an opportunity to say, I'm moving into a change that feels like better news for them than it is for me. And I feel like we need to sit with that a bit and have spaces where we can talk about that.
Yeah. Yeah. It's the getting comfortable with the being uncomfortable thing, which I can spout all day long, but it's just hard to do. It's just hard to do. When you talk about experimentation, I love that. It's actually something I have on the wall in front of me to try to remind myself to just keep experimenting, playing, being curious and all that. But what can that look like? Like, how can somebody who is in this process, what are examples of ways that they could experiment? Hey, let's take a quick break because I've got something fantastic to share with you. Have you ever thought about what it really means to live your best life? Well, my dear friend Lou Blazer has, and she's sharing her discoveries in her weekly newsletter called We're All Getting Older. It's a newsletter for anyone exploring personal growth, intentional living, and embracing joy, especially in midlife and beyond. Lou has this wonderful obsession with the idea of dying happy, and she shares her insights on how to make the most of our lives right now, every week. I look forward to opening her emails every week because it's filled with inspiration and actionable ideas. If that sounds like something you'd love too, you got to check it out. Signing up is super easy. Just head over to loublazer.com. That's LOUBLASER.com. And you can do it there. Trust me, you'll thank yourself for it. And now back to our regularly scheduled programming. How can somebody who is in this process, what are examples of ways that they could experiment?
I think it depends what what you love, but I would love to have people connect with what they love, remember what they love, not just, oh, I love my kids. I know we love our kids. What else? What did you love to do when you were little, for example? And so it could look like enrolling for a 6-week pottery class or something, something low, low stakes. You're not looking to make this your profession. 6 weeks is not forever, but it gives you some structure on your calendar and an opportunity to try something new. And I think what it does for me when I think about that kind of example is it gives us a really tangible way to remember that learning new things is really hard. Like, I have a pottery collection, and I remember taking a pottery class when I was on maternity leave many years ago. I was terrible at it, like so bad at getting that pot centered on that wheel that it gave me a whole new appreciation for the mugs and bowls that I have in my cupboard. And I remember thinking, oh, this is way harder than I thought. And I think when we are learning our way into something new, as adults especially, we're used to moving in circles where we have a pretty high level of mastery of things, right? You get promoted or you get more work given to you because you're good at your work. And we gravitate increasingly as we get older more and more into areas that we're comfortable in and we're good at, right? So having some things where we're not good at it, where we have this rookie mindset, this beginner experience is a good thing. I think another example, certainly that our family that we've been trying is we try to get out of winter if we can. And so not feeling like, oh, I need to be a 3-month snowbird and head to, I don't know, Florida or something for the whole winter. What we've done is we've been working remotely for 3 or 4 weeks in different places, 2 or 3 months of the year at different times, trying different cities. And at first, it was trying to find the city where we thought we might go for a subsequent winter. But then all of a sudden we said, no, no, we don't have to make that kind of commitment. We can just enjoy a few weeks in a bunch of different places and without the pressure of having to say this is the place or does this have enough going for it that we want to come back here. It doesn't matter. We use that as an experiment. We do a lot of home exchanging, and so we can go and live in someone else's home for a few weeks, enjoy that place, come back. And it allowed us to kind of hold the plan a bit loosely without feeling completely untethered, because I think part of this messy middle stage can feel really like we have no anchor. And so trying to experiment and stretch from a place of groundedness is really important. I wrote a book a couple of years ago called Elastic. And if you think about an elastic stretching, it can't stretch in all directions at once because then it's like literally just moving around in a circle, right? You have to have some part of it anchored in order for other parts of that elastic band to stretch. And so I think getting a really good sense of where those anchor points are for us, they are shifting. It may have been that our kids' school, for example, and not moving because our kids were, in high school somewhere, that anchor might be changing, but there may aren't. And so maybe it's your relationship with your partner, maybe it's your paid work, maybe it's your proximity to your parents, maybe it's your commitment to your town, but maybe there's some things that need to stay the same, and you need to remind yourself that they're the same, even as you then stretch in ways that are not, blow up your whole life and start everything all over again. And so I think allowing ourselves to dip our toe into some new ways of being, even as we remind ourselves of kind of who we are now. I have a sticker that sits on my desk that says that version of me is no longer in print. And I feel like the next beside it should be, well, which version is, And so I think having, as you mentioned, that sense of curiosity, even about ourselves, I think is a really helpful habit to cultivate during this season.
Yeah. Oh my gosh, there's so much that you said that I am like, yes, sister. The idea of stepping into to letting yourself be a beginner, I think for a long time now, I've been like, I feel like it is the key to so much because we do get to that point where we want to live where we already have mastery. We want to feel like we know what we're doing. But there's so much. I think back to when I was a kid, and the excitement came from the not knowing. The excitement came from the trying something new. So for me, that now that looks like pushing myself into doing what I call challenges. I'm trying to learn to shuffle dance right now at the age of 56. I'm back on my roller skates after 40 something years and trying to learn how to dance on roller skates, you know. Um, I've gotten into like a little art journal thing because I am purely a stick figure drawer. That's my level of art, you know, and but pushing myself into new things where I have no mastery and or a little bit of mastery and trying to expand it. Those are the things, and I call it play. For me, it's play. I try to look at, okay, what am I actually interested in doing? And that's, I've always wanted to dance, and I've always told myself I'm not a dancer. I've always felt like Lucille Ball or Elaine Bennis from you know doing the Elaine on the Seinfeld or whatever. So there there's something really exciting about doing stuff that is just new and makes me feel less than capable.
And I love that because to me, even the way, Yvonne, you described that shows a particular sort of mindset around it and learning orientation around it, because that same experience can be exciting or it can be agonizing, right? Just like awful.
Yes.
And it's the objective, you know, moving from drawing stick figures to not or getting on those roller skates again. I love those examples. Um, the actual objective experience of that may not be different, but the mindset we bring to it can make all the difference, right? Because
I think it
it's
ties back, sorry to interrupt, but I think it ties back to what you said about the pottery. It doesn't, it's not what the way I'm approaching these is not that I have to be good. There, it's not about, I'm not going to be a professional roller skater or a professional dancer, and I'm certainly not going to be a professional artist, but it's about just um, experimentation, you know? Can I ask you, what do you have a daily practice for yourself that you use to stay in that experimental mindset to remind yourself or to ask yourself, okay, this version of me is not in print. What version is? How do you tap into that question for yourself?
yeah. Admittedly, I'm not very good at daily stuff,
Okay.
but I try to figure out what kind of what how far to zoom out on that that actually does help me see that there is a rhythm to it for me. So some people are really good at daily disciplines. I tend to have a bit of a rhythm either weekly or even if I look at over the course of, say, a year, where you go, oh, like I am learning, I am growing, I am moving in a direction that I'm feeling good about. So, for example, for the last few years, I've enrolled in particular events or experiences that I've always wanted to attend. And they might happen once a year or something like that. And so I'm attending something called the Aspen Festival of Ideas in June, and I'm going in September to the Fast Company Innovation Festival in New York City. A couple years ago, I went to Modern Elder Academy with Chip Conley and something else called
Mm-hmm.
House of Business. Like trying to kind of put these big things on the calendar to have both something to look forward to and to work toward. And at a more sort of micro level, I run a leadership book club every month. And for that book club, it's a book club for people that we say it's the book club with no reading required, because I do the reading and I kind of summarize 4 to 6 titles on a theme every month. That gives me it's kind of like a way to hack my brain and my schedule to go, I need to be reading
Mm-hmm.
the books in the field that I'm in so that I'll be ready for book club. And it's kind of a way of putting something on my calendar that's going to make me do work that I know I need to do anyway. I've enrolled in a particular gym program that gets me to the gym Monday, Wednesday, and Friday at 6 a.m. So some things like that where I put I need to make it not about willpower, but about habit and schedule,
Yeah.
where that I do find that really helps. And also just making sure that there are gaps in my schedule that allow me for some reflection time. And I'm not really good at that daily, but I am good at it in a bigger sense. And so, you know, I do spend a big chunk of the summer beside a lake. And, you know, I make sure that I'm getting out of winter a little bit. I feel like that's a theme today on my snowy day. But um, yeah, so I feel like maybe, and I hope that's encouraging to people that maybe don't feel like they are super good at daily discipline. I try to figure out like over what period of time do things make sense? So for example, this week I am crazy busy, but it's because last week I was in Costa Rica on a retreat with my clients. So, and this, I'm leaving today for Paris with my daughter and my mother. Like I have these beautiful breathing space moments, but it means that in between that breathing space, I am working my tail off, right? So trying to get kind of the rhythm right. For some people that is every day, and for other people like me, I need to kind of look at it from further away.
Yeah. Wow. So now you made a trend. Well, you were still doing corporate strategy consulting, correct? And at some point or another, I guess you felt the call to start working with midlife women. Can you talk about that for a moment and what did that look like and how did you start transitioning and moving into the work that you're doing with women?
Yeah, absolutely. So my background is I do mostly strategy facilitation, strategic planning with large nonprofits and other kinds of mission-driven organizations. I'm based in Canada.
Hmm.
And I still do that work, but what started happening was the leaders of those organizations, maybe their board chairs or their CEOs, started seeking me out for one-on-one coaching. And so over time, that has become the theme of reimagining your next chapter has become true both for the organizations I work with and for the people that I coach. But because I tend to be a group facilitator at heart, I really love collective work. Even in my coaching, I'm creating these group experiences where people can begin to think about transitions collectively. And so I mentioned having just gotten back from Costa Rica, there were a group of us, happened to be midlife women who were each going through different kinds of transitions and were willing to take a week and change their scenery in order to change their perspective. And they were each working on their own story,
Hmm.
but collectively. And so they felt less alone in it. And even though they were navigating different transitions from each other, I think they were quite amazed at how many similarities there were between them. And so, in the speaking I'm doing and the coaching and the strategy work, it's all in this idea of reimagining what you want your next chapter to look like. And I think organizations need to do that as well as individuals. You need a picture of something compelling to pull you forward. It's not just a leaving behind of something, but it's actually sketching in the details of what we want to move toward. Because if we can describe it in detail, including to other people, they might join us in that, and we're all kind of moving toward the same thing together. And so that was part of my evolution of the business that I started 27 years ago. But it was also a decision through that time to level up in my business, even just before my kids were all gone out of the house, and saying, I want to have some things kind of in the pipeline that are using my brain and introducing me to an inspiring wider community of people. So that, and it wasn't a sort of one for one trade of, kids for work. It's always been both and always about how the whole mix works for me. But that would be another sort of encouragement I would give people is that I think we need to be inspired by the company we keep. And sometimes our circles have become a bit stale, a bit small. Maybe they were completely linked to our kids. I mean, it was maybe the parents on the soccer team or whatever it was, and you just don't see them as much as you used to because you're not sitting on the bleachers together.
Right.
Um, need to begin to think what our social networks look like. And when I look at some of my friends and my parents, their social worlds have become really active and rich and lovely in midlife and later because they've had some time to be able to reconnect with old friends, to create new friendships. They're not tied down to schlepping kids around to the latest tournament or dentist appointment quite the same way. And so I think building in an investment in friendships and other inspiring work-related role models and that kind of thing has also become quite important for me in this season.
Wow. So many good things here. I have loved this conversation with you, and I know you need to get ready to get out the door to Paris. So I think
Darn.
I love I first of all, I just want to say I'm glad you brought up the idea of friendship later in life because I think so many the story that's out there about getting older is that it's harder to make friendships. And that I found that to be very hopeful to hear that from you that and it's been my experience mostly because of doing the podcast. I've made new friends. It wasn't why I started a podcast, but that's what's happened is I have found myself surrounded by some new people and I've still got the old friends, but those parent friends who were on the sidelines watching soccer with me, those relationships have faded back. And it is so everything that you've just said really is very resonant for me, for sure, for sure. And I think it gives a lot of hope, if we can be intentional about having those things on our calendar to look forward to, like getting ourselves into situations where we can either meet new people or be very intentional about reconnecting with the people we love and want more time with.
Yeah, I think it's a big thing. And I think also going back to what we were saying about the importance of mindset and how we frame it, it's our nervous systems don't really know the difference between excitement and anxiety, right? They feel really similar to us. And so if we can frame something up as an adventure, as, curiosity, as an experiment, as play, as you said, that has a really different ring to it, right? And our bodies don't really know the difference between that and being stressed and anxious and klutzy and nervous. And, so I think there's something about what's going on inside our head and in the language we use that helps as well to shape this. And so I think there is an element of stepping into new adventure. And I went through a patch where it just didn't feel like that. I was clinging pretty tightly to the old chapter because I was really enjoying it. And I think I've met some people lately that I think are sort of exceptionally brave for stepping out of something really good to move into something even better. And I think sometimes we think that, something needs to be awful before we should close the door on it and try something new. And so I think if we can, yeah, come at it with that sense of curiosity and adventure, it just frames the whole thing differently, and it doesn't have to feel quite as tragic. But all of that comes inside the grieve the loss too,
Yeah.
because you're allowed to be sad. And I think in the midst of it, I felt like such a cliche that so many people go through this, and I think I thought that knowing about it would allow me to skip it.
Right.
And you can't skip it. You got to go through it. And
Ah,
so,
don't
just
you
don't
wish you
feel
could just
alone,
skip
right?
it?
Just gotta skip it. It's like saying we know exercise is good for us, and somehow if we could just know that, it doesn't
Right?
yield benefits as actually going and doing your reps, right?
Yeah.
So I think we got to do the reps.
Yeah. Oh, 100%. Thank you so much. How can people get in touch with you to learn more about the programs that you're offering and everything else?
The easiest way is just straight up on my website, which is my name. So it's Rebecca Sutherns, SUTHERNS.com. And if your listeners go to Rebecca Sutherns /podcast, there's a place there where they can download for free a copy of my book Elastic that I mentioned, an e-copy of that. But there's also kind of a fun little quiz on there. And the quiz is kind of a what's true for you now kind of diagnostic that sometimes what helps us is we go, I just don't feel right, but I don't know what I'm missing. I don't know what I need. And in some ways, this little quiz might lead you to that to say, do you need challenge? Do you need contribution? Do you need some spaciousness? Like, what is it that you most need? And gives you a few ideas to tap into whatever you are kind of scoring strongly in. So if people listening like quizzes, they can go there as well.
I'm
But if
heading
you
over there. I think it's the
it's really
perfect
fun,
time for me
actually.
to do that quiz. So
It is
selfishly, I'm
really
thrilled.
fun. And our next kind of immersive coaching adventure isn't until 2026 because I did just get home from the one this year in Costa Rica. But we're going to be in southern France at the end of September of next year. And the wait list for that is currently open, and registration will be happening later this spring for next September 2026. So if people are looking for a big adventure and are kind of plan ahead kind of people like I am, that's the next one there. But certainly there's one-on-one coaching available between now and then.
That is fantastic. Rebecca, thank you so much for your time today. I hope you have a great trip.
Thanks so much, Yvonne. It's been a real pleasure. Thanks for the conversation.
Well, there you have it. Woo-hoo-hoo. Navigating midlife transitions can feel messy, uncomfortable, and downright scary. But I think Rebecca's approach to embracing experimentation and leaning into curiosity makes it feel so much more doable, doesn't it? If you're feeling stuck or overwhelmed by a transition in your life, I encourage you to check out the free resources that Rebecca mentioned, including her What's True for You Now quiz. I'm going to have links to all that in the show notes for you. And I did take her quiz. Trust me, it's worth your time. It was spot on. And I'd love to hear from you. What experiments are you willing to try to get comfortable with being uncomfortable? What little step can you take today to lean into your next chapter? Let me know what you're thinking. You can reach out to me on social media. I'm on Instagram as Late Bloomer Living, or you can drop me an email. That's latebloomerliving@gmail.com. Hey, if you enjoyed this episode, it would mean the world to me if you just take a moment to share this episode with someone you know who's struggling with their own transition. Let's help more people embrace the adventure that is midlife. Okay, my friend, thank you so much for listening. Can't wait to catch you next time. Hey, bloom like you mean it, okay? See you next week.